Italian rugby depth chart for 2022, folks. Sorry it's a little bit late. These things do take a while to get out. And Italy's already named their Six Nations squad for 2023. So there's, I guess, a couple of talking points about where Kieran Crowley's boys were last year to where they are looking at now in 2023. But we're going to go through the win-loss record for 2022 and see which players were used, how much rotation was done, which guys kind of came into the squad, which guys have maybe dropped out. And you guys can let us know your thoughts on how Italy are looking into a World Cup year with a pretty tough pool, as always. And remember, we've done this for Ireland and France and New Zealand, South Africa, and so on. So it's kind of an interesting look to see just how each kind of coach is managing their players. Now, the win-loss record for Italy is one that I think is largely pretty pleasing. Obviously, they lose their first 4 games in the Six Nations, which is it's been just such a regular thing for Italy in the Six Nations. They were on an incredible losing run. Maybe the Scottish loss 22-33 at home was probably the one that burned the most of those results. I mean, the France game had some positives. The Ireland one had a red card and then another guy off because it was a front rower that had gone off, so it was kind of 15-13, so you can kind of, in a way, disregard it. They didn't score a point against England, but then they beat Wales away from home, that last-minute play. So, absolutely, I think the fact that they hadn't had a win in the Six Nations for as long as they did meant that even though they still came last, there was still a big positive with that win. Then the mid-of-the-year games, they play Tier 2 opposition. They win against Portugal, unconvincing, 38-31. Then they beat Romania 45-13. And then they lost in what was, I guess, as equally devastating. Well, of the flip side of the Wales result, right? As good as the Wales result was, the Georgia result was terrible. 28-19, like a massive result for Georgia, but terrible for Italian rugby, just because these teams don't play each other that much. And people usually say, Italy, they may get beaten in the Six Nations, but they beat all these other teams. Well, not in that case. That was a bad loss to take. And then in the autumn series, they beat Samoa, which is, again, a good result because it was a convincing one, 49-17. They took another Tier 1 scalp with Australia, 28-27. They, had to hang on with a missed kick at the end, costing the Aussies. And then they lost pretty convincingly 63-21 against South Africa. So I think probably more positives. The fact they got those 2 Tier 1 scalps despite the loss to Georgia, despite a heavy loss to South Africa, despite kind of struggling against Portugal, I think you'd still say the team is on the up. Like if you're looking at the trending path of teams, I think the Italians are certainly a team tracking in the right direction. We'll see if all that investment in the youth pays off. It does look to be doing so far. How about depth by position? Well, I didn't do the Italian depth chart last year, so this is a bit of a new one for me, but we'll still go through it. Front rowers, Fischetti on the loose head side is the most played front rower of all the Italian guys this year. He gets like 2/3 of the game time. So very much a reliable player, and he's playing some good rugby. He's a pretty reliable scrummager, so very pleasing to have. He's another one of these guys who's now applying his trade outside Italian rugby, because obviously with just Zebre and Benetton, it's kind of good to get guys out into other countries, so there's more spots to be taken at Zebre and Benetton for the kind of upcoming guys. So that's good. Ivan Nemar is there in blue for loose head, although he's not in the Six Nations squad. If rumours be true, it's for all the kind of off-the-field stuff. And then Sharif Traore, also not in the Six Nations squad, but is in the Italian A squad, there in yellow. So Fischetti is the only one at the moment of these guys who's in the Six Nations squad, but he has been the most reliable guy, playing more than 2/3 of the game time. Hooker, Lucchese is your main man there in blue. He has split the time with guys like Nicotera, who's there in, did I say Lucchese was in blue? Lucchese's in green with just under half the game time. Nicotera's in blue. And then Hami Fiver is there in yellow. I was really pleased when he got capped for the Italians, but then he doesn't seem to be in the mix anymore since his move to Worcester and then Worcester going under. It doesn't look like he's in the mix. Some of the Italian people on this channel tell me he's back on this side of the equator and potentially not looking to further his career up north, but we'll kind of have to wait and see. Lucchese's definitely been your main guy, and I think he's been really impressive. I do like him as a a destructive kind of ball-carrying hooker, but also he's injured, so not available for the Six Nations. I think his injury is pretty long-term as well, which is kind of unfortunate. And then Biji's also been there a bit for Italy as well. And I've got Neymar there for that one game when the Italians had the hookers sent off, injured, and then he had to kind of fill in with uncontested scrums, but you can kind of just put a cross through it, but technically he was there. Tight head is a little bit more of a mixture with Ferrari there in green, Ciccarelli there in blue, and then Pasquale there in yellow. The three of those guys, none of them are really that much more game time than the other. Obviously Pasquale's got the least of those three guys. It's pretty much a third to Ferrari and a third to Ciccarelli. But obviously the big news in the Italian front row when you're looking at the current Six Nations squad is that Riccioni is coming back after a long-term injury layoff, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him kind of slot straight into the starting lineup because that guy is absolute class. You definitely want that guy available when you've got a World Cup on the horizon. So, I mean, there's been a few other guys who've had a little bit of game time on the tight head side, but for the most part it's been Ferrari and Ciccarelli, Lucchesi, Nicotera, and then Fischetti and Neymar. Those are kind of your starter and reserve guys. Remembering, of course, that when Italy did play those 3 games in the middle of the year, they did rotate the squad a wee bit more. So some of the big gun guys did get a rest. But yeah, that's your front row. The locks are way more consistent than any of the other positions, I think. Tight head lock has been Nicolo Canone, and he's had a really good year. Did I put him in my team of the year for the Northern Hemisphere? If I didn't, he was close. If I did, it's because he was very good. You know, I'm a stats guy. He's got some really good, ball carrying stats for a hooker. Very busy, good work rate. Still only a young man as well. So he gets almost 70% of the game time, and I can see why. David Sisi, Marco Fusa, Bram Stein, and a little bit of Federico Ruzza there as well on the tight head lock side, but for the most part it's about Nicolo Canone, and I'm not complaining about that by any means. Obviously it'd be nice to see some of the other guys get a little bit more game time. From memory, injuries had a little bit to say with that, but Canone has been in great form, so more of him please. And then maybe my favourite Italian forward, Federico Ruzza, there on the loose head lock side. Real skills guy. I've been going on and on and on about him for ages, so I won't do it now, but again, 70+% of the game time in the second row on that side, a little bit on the other side, and then even a little bit in the back row. So he has been ever present in the Italian side under Kieran Crowley. So he's one guy, despite the fact that he's one of the older guys in the squad. He's only in his late 20s, but still, compared to all these 21 and 22-year-olds, he's one of the old boys, but he retains his position, I think, for a reason. So those are kind of your main guys. We'll see if that's the case in the Six Nations. But anyway, loose forwards, 6 is clearly a bit more mixed, whereas 7 is very stable. If you start with 7, Michele Lamaro, the captain, it makes sense. He's the captain. He leads from the front. He's got a huge work rate, loves tackles. He's played, I think, literally 90% of the minutes for Italy in 2022. So, it's been pleasing to see him be able to give some winning speeches, with the reporter at the end of the game for a change, after seeing him have a pretty kind of miserable 2021 where he would just talk about hard luck, or never really hard luck, but he talked about not being consistent for 80 minutes kind of thing. For him to have a couple of those moments against Wales, against Australia, where he was able to just talk about the good work that was done, was very pleasing for him because he's a great player. Zuliani and Bram Stein have also kind of filled in a little bit in his absence, but it's pretty much the Lamaro show when he's there. 6 is a mix, like I mentioned, Pettinelli, Negri, Ruzza, Zuliani, Bram Stein, although he's kind of fallen out of favour. All these guys have played a bit of game time at 6. Pettinelli the most, Negri the next, so Pettinelli's got a third, Negri a quarter, Federico just under a fifth of the game time. So it's kind of a decreasing scale, but it's a good mix that different guys have had a run in the number 6 jersey. The number 8 has largely been Toa Halofihi, although he is injured as we lead into the Six Nations, so someone else is going to have a crack. But if you're looking at Halofihi in green, above him in blue is the other Lorenzo Canone, the other Canone. And he came on in autumn and looked really good at number 8. He's even younger than his brother. He's another one of these 21, 22-year-old. I think he's 22. And he looked very, very good. Scored a try in one of the games. Very, very hard man, seemingly. So he may be going to put pressure on that number 8 jersey anyway. Halafihi not being there makes, I guess, Kieran Crowley's selection a little bit easier. But yeah, he's had like a fifth of the game time, all pretty much at the end of the year, and I look forward to seeing that guy get some more. Obviously, Halafihi, when he gets back, is another option. Jamarioli. I think it's a J sound, isn't it, instead of a G? Not in the Six Nations squad, but certainly another option at number 8. I don't think he's the biggest, but he's certainly a very athletic number 8. And then Petinelli's also had a little bit of a go alongside Bramstead at number 8. But between Kanoni and Halafihi, you've got two pretty regular guys who've both had a bit of game time. So, yeah, the forwards, for the most part, relatively consistent with only a couple of positions where they rotate, namely tight head and number 6. Don't have like a clear favourite as the starting guy. But, yeah, like I mentioned, there's still a few guys injured and there's a few guys to come back. So we'll see how that changes in 2023. For the backs, there's a few guys who aren't available for the Six Nations, which may be a little bit concerning. Varney's your number one guy at number 9 with about a third of the game time. And it seems like he's getting a pretty good relationship with Paulo Garbisi at 10, but Garbisi's injured, so that's unfortunate. But Varney's still a very young man, third of the game time. Alessandro Fusco, he's another guy who's also very young. And then Callum Brayley at the other end of the scale in yellow. He's retired from international rugby now, so you can kind of discount him. He had about a fifth of the game time for Italy in 2022. So his time is pretty much gone. But then you've got Alessandro Garbisi there as well in purple. So between Garbisi in purple, Fusco in blue, and Varney in green, you've got guys having between a third and a fifth of the game time in 2022. So certainly a good taste, a good run of experience at international rugby. And all these guys are like in their early 20s. So heaps of improvement to come from them. You would imagine. I mean, Albanese also had a little bit of a taste of the action as well. So, yeah, I do think that's an area where there's potential for the number 1 guy to be changed between now and the World Cup. But Varney seems to have he's the front runner at the moment anyway. Garbisi is certainly the front runner at 10 with that 50-odd%, more than almost 60% of the game time there at 10 for Italy in 2022. But he's injured for the Six Nations. So it's Tommy Allen in blue who kind of takes over. He's a veteran at this point, one of the most capped guys, if not the most capped guy in the Italian squad currently. So with a third of the game time, he's still been able to play his part. And then Dare there in yellow, the kind of youth guy, if you can call it youth when he's not that much younger than Garbisi. But anyway, he's still very young. So but a potential one if they give him some game time. Six Nations maybe on the bench. We'll see, because then Padovani is also there at the very top of that little number 10 slice of the graph. He got a little bit of game time. I think it was against South Africa he finished the game. So he may be the other guy who covers 10. We'll see. We'll see how they go. But I mean, if it's Varney and Garbisi going into a World Cup, I don't think you'd be complaining if you're an Italian fan. But as I said, still plenty of time for that to change. Midfield is an interesting one because 12, like I mentioned, has also been a bit of a mix. And especially when you consider Marco Zanon, who's the leading guy at 12, isn't even in the Six Nations squad. So he's a leading guy in terms of minutes, but has dropped out of favour. And then Leonardo Marin is there in blue, but I think he's also injured for the Six Nations, isn't he? So you're looking well down the chart in terms of who do you play at 12. It's still a question to be answered. You've had Maurici, Minocello, a little bit of Tommy Allen there at 12 as well. But it's certainly one that like, you're pleased it's not going into a World Cup looking like that. But ideally your first guy or your second guy is available for the competition you're going to play in. But for 12, it's going to be different anyway in 2023. And then 13, goodness gracious me, Juan Ignacio Brex. He's almost up to the same amount of game time as what we saw from Lamaro. He's been ever present, and he has been in phenomenal form. He's got a genuine, pretty all-round game right now, doesn't he? He's been distributing, he's been carrying, defensively pretty sharp, kicks the ball, very, very pleasing player. Minocello and Zanon have also had a bit of game time, but it's been mostly about Brex. Maybe a bit too much. Maybe they needed to give one of the young guys a wee crack at 13 just to build a bit of depth, but Brex has been on good form, so rewarded. And then the outside backs, Monty Ioane on the left wing with like 2/3 bit more of the game time. Not available for the Six Nations because he's down with the Rebels doing the pre-season. So that's a big gap to fill, and he's genuinely a big ball carrying tackle buster. which is going to be hard to replace in terms of that X factor. You've also had Padovani and Bruno on the left in blue and yellow respectively. Then the right, speaking of Bruno and Padovani, Bruno is there in green, Padovani is there in blue. They've had pretty much the same amount of game time on the right wing. Bruno, I thought, has been actually pretty impressive when I've seen him play. Very elusive kind of guy, smart ball carrier. So pleased to see him on the rise. Menoncello's there in yellow. Trua got a bit of game time there in purple. Mori as well. Capuzzo had to shift, I think, very late one game for a token amount of time. But the right wing has certainly seen a little bit more of a mix, but some of that talent will probably have to shift left for the Six Nations in Ioane's absence. And then Capuzzo there at fullback, 2/3 of the game time pretty much. He was ever present for the Italians, had some great moments, obviously set up that try for the win over Wales. Phenomenal stuff. Gets Breakout Player of the Year for a reason. And then Padovani and Marin fill out the rest of the time at fullback. But looking at the Italian squad overall, there's not that many positions where the leading guy has less than half the game time. Ferrari is obviously one at tight head who's not like kind of game time dominant. Pettinelli at 6, and then Varney at 9, and even like Zanon in the 12 jersey and Bruno on the right wing. Those positions have kind of been slightly more rotational, but most of these positions have been a lock. Fischetti, Lucchesi, Canone and Ruzza, Lamaro, Halafihi, all these guys have been very consistent in their selection. So when you're looking at, you can look at the backs as well, certainly dominant Bricks, Capuzzo, but when you're looking at the overall amount of game time that the starting guys got, Italy lean more towards the consistency side than the rotation side, but are kind of in the middle. Like they're in the middle of Ireland, who's the most consistent side in picking their same 15, and they're not as rotational as like in Australia, admittedly with injuries, who changed the players a lot. They're more consistent than England and Wales, who also shifted players around. They're kind of similar to New Zealand, are the Italians. Remembering that when they played like Portugal, Romania, Georgia, Samoa, I think as well, they switched the squad around a bit. I seem to remember in June, because a lot of those June games I didn't see because they weren't broadcast here, but I know that they tried out some new players, especially against those Tier 2 sides. The squad's also very young. I think it's the youngest squad of all the Tier 1 squads this year, so it kind of shows how much faith they've got in the youth to get the job done in Italy. And I mentioned Riccione's coming back. Polledri, whether he can get in the squad in a very competitive back row, he's coming back. Minozzi's coming back. So there's a lot of kind of star players who are resuming duties with Italy in 2023. And also there's several uncapped guys in the Italian squad as well. Very young. So the squad's probably only going to get younger, if anything else. But yeah, I think there's certainly a lot to be optimistic about. The most selected 15 has been Fischetti, Lucchesi and Ferrari. Lucchesi, like I mentioned, is unavailable for the Six Nations. Ruzza and Canone in the locks. Pettinelli, Lamaro and Halafihi. Halafihi obviously not available for the Six Nations. Varney and Garbisi. Garbisi not available for the Six Nations. Zanon's not in the squad alongside Brex. And then Ioane not available for Six Nations. Bruno and Capuzzo. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those guys who were the kind of most selected guys in 2022 in their position are not available or not in the squad for the Six Nations. That's a third of the starting 15, which is maybe a little bit concerning, but given that Crowley is able to kind of balance the rotation with the consistency, maybe not. But yeah, there you go, folks. That's the Italian squad. It's a good one for me to do because the Italians are probably the Six Nations side that I'm the least familiar with, especially the Zebre guys, to be honest. I find myself not watching Zebre that much in the URC, and it's because they keep losing. They're still winless as I record this video in the 2022-2023 season. So it's kind of hard to bring myself to sit down and watch a Zebre game in all likelihood knowing that they're going to lose. But they did start the season a bit better, so that maybe reflects the amount of guys from Zebre who are in the Italian squad this year for the Six Nations. But anyway, we will see. By the way, Zebre are my daughter's favourite side, seemingly, by logo. She loves their logo, so maybe I should really get behind Zebre. But there you go. Italian depth chart, folks. I hope that was a little bit insightful. It was certainly insightful for me to see how things are looking from 2022 as we move through into 2023. If you are keen after all that to buy this fella a beer, I'll put a link down in the description to the Buy Me a Beer site. Many of you have been super generous to chuck a few bucks this way, so I can get some liquid refreshment in the hot summer heat of New Zealand's December, January. But anyway, we look forward to the Six Nations, folks. Take care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.